Welcome to another edition of the Gruber Morning Show, sponsored by the Gruber Companies.
Trevor Melton of Nikola has been sentenced.
The U.S. car market shrunk in 2023?
Barra will beat Tesla by mid-decade.
And Cybertrucks are dangerous to pedestrians. I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm Mark Schaffner.
These and other stories on the Gruber Morning Show. We want to, first of all, start this session with a congratulatory mention that Instagram has finally allowed us to stream, which means that if it's working, you get to see the green screen image behind us, which is actually a rendering from ChatGPT of a bunch of Tesla vehicles. The first one it gave us was black and white, basically. So I said, put a little more color in it. Well, it went a bit overboard. And then we decided, the psychedelic look may just be right this morning since we're celebrating Instagram joining us. So anyway, looks like we've got some people chiming in already. We've got from YouTube, Andre Malcolm _studio. He says, I was just in my neighbor's Cybertruck and it's amazing.
Oh, now that's pretty cool.
We can't wait to get in one. Do you remember we had one here at our service center 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
It was just before the release, and it was in the middle of the night, and all we got that morning was a picture of a Cybertruck in front of our facility, and we're all saying, how did we miss this, right?
Yes.
Well, it turns out that one of the test drivers from Europe, actually, was driving across the United States promoting it before the release, just a day or two before the release it was, and she had to stop at Mecca, which is the Tesla Roadster Independent Service Center, or the Auto Shop of the Future, Gruber Motor Company, and we're sorry we missed her, but she must have been here in the middle of the night at some point, and hopefully it will be repeated at some time.
We're certainly hoping so. Did you ever find out more about when exactly she was here, or?
I didn't get those details. And
okay.
It looks like Ray Johnson from YouTube is joining us. Welcome, Ray. Happy holidays to everyone at the Gruber Companies.
Thank you, Ray, and happy holidays to you as well.
So it looks like we've got some news items that we're going to cover today, and bringing them up here. So the U.S. car market shrinking in 2022, but EV sales went up by 2/3. So there's an offset to that. And they say even though fewer cars were bought in the United States in 2022 compared to the year before, marking a decline for the first time in over a decade, more of these vehicles were electric. They say U.S. passenger vehicles fell in 2022, but the number of EVs went up by a remarkable 65%, an increase of almost 2/3 compared to 2021. They say that EVs accounted for 5.8% of all new cars sold in the U.S., an increase from 3.1% the year before. They do mention, though, that Tesla lost ground last year with a market share that dropped from 72% in 2021 to only 65% in 2022. But they're still the biggest player. This drop does show that the competitors are ever more prevalent these days and are affecting its dominance in the U.S. EV segment.
Yeah, and I took some time to look at 2023 numbers so far as well, and doing some comparison to 2022, kind of like this comparison between 22 and 21. 2023 has been a bounce back year for the auto industry as a whole. It looks like overall there's going to be growth of about 8%, where 2022 was the first decline in several years. EV sales have continued to skyrocket, though. In 2023, they're up roughly 50% over 2022. And so the market share of EVs is also continuing its meteoric rise. It's up to about 9% of the overall market, which you look back here, it said 5.8% of all new cars in 2022 were EVs, in 3.1% in 2021, all the way up to 9%. Pretty impressive. That said Tesla lost ground in 2022. Well, Tesla has continued to lose ground in 2023. They only have about a 50% market share now. And yet it's not because they're selling fewer cars. It's
Right.
because everybody else is selling more and the market is growing so much. You've got Ford with their F-150 Lightning. They've had a lot of sales in that area. General Motors is starting to sell some. And then you've got some of the new players like Lucid and Rivian that are continuing to ramp up their production. In fact, we're on track to sell between 1.3 and 1.4 million EVs this year. First time ever that we've had over 1 million in sales. My biggest surprise as I was looking at numbers to compare was hybrids.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, which is surprising to me as well.
Yeah, I thought, well, what's this deal with hybrids? And apparently, hybrids are going to make up almost 9% of the auto market in 2023, which is up from about 4% in 2022 and around 3% in 2021. Hybrids as a class are selling faster at a faster growth rate even than EVs are.
What do you attribute that to?
Personally, I attribute that to people who want to go to a battery electric vehicle, but they still got concerns about things like charging infrastructure or what's going to happen if I run out of juice, basically.
Right.
And instead of trusting that the charging infrastructure is there, they're not quite ready to make that jump. So they like to have the gas engine for just a little bit longer.
So my initial reaction was, I've been really tough on the exotic car manufacturers, like Ferrari and Lamborghini, moving into hybrids or even the GM Corvette. But overall, this may not be that bad because a hybrid gets much better gas mileage.
Right.
Than a standard ICE vehicle. So if we have to do a slower transition into fully sustainable transportation, maybe this is, to get the population to warm up, this may be what it's going to take.
I think that's exactly where this is going, that the population is going to continue to warm up to the idea that having a battery in your car to actually power your car is okay. In fact, it's a good thing. And I personally believe a lot of these hybrid owners, when they go to buy their next car in another 5 to 10 years, that they're going to be buying fully electric instead of hybrid.
Yeah. I remember when my wife and I first got into Priuses, it was like the late 90s, I think. And that 50 miles per gallon was pretty impressive at the time compared to cars that would normally get, even the top performing cars, maybe 30 miles a gallon, 35 or so. So, it did improve things. They mentioned the manufacturers that are competing now with Tesla. They are Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Ford, of course, Cadillac, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, and Nissan. And that's what's beginning to cut into some market share. Now, the Chinese brands haven't really begun to infiltrate the U.S. yet, but that's going to be a whole nother wave of adoption.
It definitely is. BYD wants badly to get into the U.S. market, and so far, U.S. tariffs and things like that have largely prevented them from doing so. What I'm hearing rumors of is that BYD is talking about building a plant in Mexico where they can essentially export their knowledge to Mexico, build their cars in Mexico, and then import them from Mexico to the U.S.
Mm-hmm. They talk about the other newcomers in the EV space like Lucid and Rivian. They didn't account for too many of the EVs sold in the United States in the last 12 months, but here's some statistics. The 2022 production ramp-ups should be visible this year, they say, with Rivian delivered 20,332 vehicles in 2023 and 24,000 produced. So some must still be sitting at their dealerships or wherever they store them. Lucid delivered 4,369 Air sedans, although it says it built 7,180 units in total, exceeding expectations. So again, where are these cars sitting?
Right, and that's been a question for Lucid, not quite as much for Rivian, because here in 2023, Rivian's on pace to deliver 54,000 vehicles with about the same amount built. So you figure that you're going to have a certain amount of inventory that sits on the lot and is used for the inventory turns. Lucid, on the other hand, people have even been asking, they tend to sell somewhere around 1,500 cars per quarter, but they have had a tendency to build about 2,000 cars per quarter. And that trend has held true so far throughout all of 2023. That's been concerning to investors. There are analysts that have talked about that and saying, okay, even one of our other podcast host, Farzad Misbahi, has talked about how, hey, Lucid continues to build inventory and not send it. So at some point, something's got to give. And his point is a good point there.
Yeah, fire sale.
Yeah.
They say that the average price of an EV sold in the U.S. last year was $61,448, which is a 5.5% decrease compared to 2021. So the prices are coming down. And they say that the average price went down even though Tesla, the best-selling manufacturer, made all its models more expensive in 2022, only for it then to apply massive price cuts in January. And so this seems to be having an effect as demand for Teslas has visibly gone up.
Yeah, and in 2023, what analysts like to call the EV price wars is probably going to be one of the news stories of the year. I don't have exact numbers on what the average price for an EV ended up being for 2023. I think it went down to the low 50,000 range. But that means that EVs are becoming more affordable, and that's opening up mainstream adoption as well.
Looks like Instagram. John Noruzi is asking, can you explain how to convert a 75 kWh battery to 100 on Tesla S or any calibration? You know, we looked into this a couple years ago, and we have a video out there on our YouTube channel regarding this. Tesla, and we checked with them, does not allow or recommend the conversion or a 100 kW battery pack being put into a 75 kW car. There are differences between a number of things, they say, suspension changes. There are timing functions that are different, like for things like airbag deployment, safety issues. So if you do anything like this, more than likely your warranty, if there is any remaining warranty, will be voided on that vehicle. It's not physically impossible to do that, but it's certainly not recommended or supported by Tesla.
Yet you could go from a 75 up to a 90, for example, and that would be acceptable. Going from the 75 to the 85 or the 90 is not quite as big of a change, and I think it has to deal with the battery weights being much closer to one another.
And that's actually what they recommend. Their new replacement for these vehicles would be a 90 kW conversion.
Sure.
YouTube, Andre Malcolm _studio says he's one of the engineers that works on doors and windows.
So that's how he was able to get to sit in a Cybertruck. Okay.
YouTube, Brian Silver joined us. Hi, guys. So much Cybertruck news coming out. Yeah, definitely. What about that one that was trying to haul a Christmas tree in a field and got stuck? And how embarrassing that a Ford pickup truck had to pull it out. I don't think, fake news?
It was fake. People were saying that before the Ford driver was faking it to try and just get more publicity for Ford.
Wow, that sounds like our Roadster pull with that big giant Ford F-650. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I do.
Oh, you're giving the secrets away there, Pete.
The video, I think, will reveal that.
What I showed Aaron earlier today, though, this morning, there was a Ford Raptor out in the sand dunes doing a pull against a Model Y, and it lost.
Really?
Yeah, just
Model Y.
Yep.
Wow.
In the sand. Yeah.
Yeah. Different tires too. You'd think that the Raptor would have the advantage in that case. Amazing.
You definitely would. Instagram, Fires Ablazing, said, isn't the majority of EVs being produced in China? I just saw a report on this making EV sales fall for the beginning of 2024. And there's reports on Lucid going bankrupt also. Well, there's a couple questions there that we can unpack, I think. First, aren't the majority of EVs being produced in China? I know that Tesla has the Shanghai factory. They produce a lot of their electric vehicles from there. But for electric vehicles sold in the U.S., a majority of them are manufactured here in the U.S. It has to do with the federal government $7,500 rebate for people who want to buy EVs. In order to qualify for that rebate, a majority of the car has to be built, assembled, and sourced from parts in the United States.
Interesting. And then the question, reports on Lucid going bankrupt. You know, my take on that is, if your wealthy uncle has been funding your business and continues to do so, I don't think bankruptcy is in your future. Now, let's put this in perspective. The Saudis are, one of the majority shareholders in Lucid. And the question is, would they really let that company fail, considering it is their second act? They've got to get away from fossil fuel and move into something more sustainable. And EVs is the perfect candidate.
I completely agree with you on that one. The PIF fund from Saudi Arabia owns over 60% of Lucid, and they would be putting some $7 or $8 billion at risk if Lucid were to go bankrupt. They have enough ownership stake in that company that they could just take it private if they wanted.
Sure. And then let's not forget that Lucid is actually the leader in technology these days. Motor technology, drivetrain technology. I don't think bankruptcy would ever come into the picture, even if the Saudis decided to bail, because somebody would buy Lucid immediately. It would be a heck of a bargain to get that technology.
Oh, it definitely would. I think the reports on Lucid going bankrupt are probably just rumors.
Yeah, probably the short sellers creating those rumors to try to prop up their positions.
Actually, the stock has been up since.
It?
Yeah, and I think Mark even mentioned that usually the stock will start performing higher. So I was keeping an eye on it, and at one point it went up like, I think it was like 80-something%. Or not 80%. I'm sorry. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it went up pretty good for what it's been doing.
It reached a low of $3.75 weeks ago, and I think some of you had the foresight to get in. And of course, we can't talk about that because we're not investment advisors. But the last time I saw it was like $4.30 or something.
Yeah, I reached like $5 at one point. I'm trying to pull it up right now to see.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. It's at $4.76 right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so it went to like 5.10. It looks like what the last week it went to 5.10 as high.
So Lucid has redeemed themselves.
Well, and not only that, some of those reports, I actually saw some reports about how Lucid stock was going to disintegrate yesterday because Lucid was unlisted from the NASDAQ 100. And we went through that last week and said, hey, really, it doesn't mean anything for Lucid.
Right.
It's a prestige badge. It's like having the little blue badge on your Twitter account that you pay $8 a month for.
Right.
That says you're verified.
All right.
On Instagram, Roberts JG says there is no push to build more electric generating plants. Until that happens, there's no chance I'd be getting interested in getting an EV.
The only thing I can say to address that is a couple of years ago we had a contact from the local utility here, Arizona Public Service. And the concern back then was also, will the grid be able to keep up with the proliferation of electric vehicles? Obviously you're going to need more power. And it was surprising that we ended up doing a video, researched it thoroughly, and the grid is very healthy. The improvements and the expansion continues. And if anything, you're not hearing things about California rollouts and brownouts anymore.
True.
So I think that the government and the utilities have got it right this time, and it doesn't appear to be as big an issue as everyone thought.
I know that Bill Gates has come out and said publicly that the potential biggest threat to the electric infrastructure are the high voltage power lines that run long distances. If we can get even one or two more of those backbone type of pieces of infrastructure in place, it should be fine.
So the issue is more distribution than actual generating capacity.
It's more distribution, and the reason for the distribution, ironically, is all of the environmental hoops that people have to jump through.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me. Germany went through that, of course, as well, with the Gigafactory there in Berlin. YouTube, Brian Silver said, once the new hybrid owners realize that they can, for some daily driving without using the gas, but still need to maintain the ICE, they'll start to get that they'll start to get that EVs do it all. Good point. You know, my complaint about hybrids is not only are we still using fossil fuel burners, scaled down a bit, you know, granted, but the maintenance costs of having two separate drivetrains in your vehicle definitely is going to take its toll as well.
I definitely agree with that. And YouTube, Ramon Hurd also chimes in on this. He said, it should be interesting to hear about the horror stories that come from hybrid drivers once they start having issues with their cars.
Yeah.
And that feeds into that same narrative. I think the hybrid push is an emotional one. It's not people thinking about rationally about this is going to be more complicated. It's going to be more expensive to maintain. Now I have a battery that eventually, if I lose my battery, I could be paying several $1,000s for it. Plus, I have all of my regular maintenance that I have to do.
ICE.
That's for an ICE vehicle. They don't think of it that way. They still have that fear of, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get caught on the road, and I'm going to run out of electricity, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right. Back in the day, the Priuses, when the batteries went bad in Priuses, there was a $6,000 bill for a new replacement battery. You know, in an ICE vehicle, you have distributed costs. Granted, if you do an entire engine rebuild, it could approach that, but how often does that really happen? You've got fuel system, you've got exhaust system, you know, and transmission, for example. None of it is going to approach anywhere near the cost of a battery replacement.
Exactly.
So now in a hybrid, you've got it all. You get that. All right.
And
It looks like we're going to have another camera coming live here for Instagram. Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, while we're doing that, we'll continue on with some of our comments on TikTok. Van Goat has talked about how he said he thinks that electric sales are going to fall off just a little bit at the beginning of the years, but hybrid would still rise.
Interesting. Okay. Well, time will tell. So the next news item, Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors in Yahoo Finance, said that the company plans to sell more EVs in the U.S., now get this, than any other automaker. Wow. You know, I think that if you began to take a look at production capacity between GM and Tesla, that would be an interesting statistic.
Definitely would.
And now bear in mind, even if production capacity is larger for GM, they're still building ICE vehicles. They have active production lines.
Right.
So they're not converting 100% to EV. But anyway, that's her claim. She said that all this will happen by the middle of this decade. So we've got a few years there. She also said that EVs are a huge opportunity for the company. Unlike the EV1 in the last century when GM decided, no, there's no market for EVs.
Yeah.
So let's retrieve them and crush them all. She said what we've seen and what that represents is that people do believe in EVs, and there's a huge opportunity here. So at GM, she says we're focused on executing well, really work to listen and understand what the customers are looking for. And remember, we're not just necessarily selling at the premium end. We're going to have electric vehicles affordable at the $30,000. And then our joint venture, the partnership with Honda, we're going to be doing something even more affordable, without putting numbers on this one, than with our most affordable electric vehicle. She does add, she says she thinks that this is it's a little bit longer game. We're taking all the steps to do it right, to make sure that we're positioned to have a full portfolio of vehicles. And we have said that by mid-decade, we'll be selling more EVs in this country than anyone else. When they asked her about Tesla, she said, including Tesla.
You know, and while General Motors did take and roll back some of their EV goals a little bit this fall, for example, the production of the Chevy Silverado got moved from the beginning of 2024 more toward the beginning of 2025. GM continues to be all in on the goal of going all electric in their vehicle production by 2035. Mm-hmm. That was as recently as earlier this month at the Barclays Global Automotive and Mobility Tech Conference. CFO Paul Johnson reiterated that, and he said that he thought that GM was going to be able to reach profitability on their EV division by the end of 2025 as well.
So here's a reporter's take on Mary Barra's outrageous claims recently. He says, for the past few years, every automaker said that they were coming for Tesla, and so far, they haven't been able to successfully overtake Tesla. I think that it's going to take more than a few polished interviews to do so. The legacy automakers really need to take EVs seriously, and I am of the opinion that they are now trying. All right, looks like we've got some more comments. TikTok, Van Goat, he says hybrid will rise. Click battle on TikTok, this is great. TikTok, Van Goat Wagon, I'd love some feedback from Amazon on how their Rivian vehicles are performing. Don't have any data on that in this podcast, but
I don't. Yep, that would be a good thing for our team to potentially look up. Maybe Cassie or Richard could look up and see if there's anything out there in the press about how the Rivian electric delivery vans are doing.
Mm-hmm. And we are starting a bio series on our videos, which are going to cover topics like this. How is Rivian doing? Where did they come from? And what's the prognosis for the future for them? Van Goatwagon, he says, at Click Battle, thumbs up. There we go. And Brooklyn Staten from TikTok says, what's the story with the sunglasses? Well, the future is bright, as the next comment says. And here we go. We're going into the sales pitch.
Oh, absolutely. Are you ready, Richard?
I sure am. So I see that you have a question about sunglasses. Well, while I can't give you an answer on that, what I do have for you is a solution. And a solution to what, you might ask? Well, when you have your sunglasses, where are you going to put them? How are you going to make sure they don't get scratched up? Well, these are our leather sunglass cases. They come customizable. They are genuine leather, and they are $79.99 on our website. Unless you use code Richard or Aaron, you get 10% off.
And we'd be so happy if you just bought some of these.
Most definitely would be. Thank you, Richard.
Instagram, Mike Malecki Realtor says, that's a great question talking about the battery conversion. Yes, it is. And, you know, there are a lot of companies now popping up that are doing this kind of independent service work. And the version that I gave you earlier is that Tesla will not do it, will not allow it, and won't warranty it. The independents typically are willing to tackle projects like this.
Mm-hmm. And there have been many instances, I think, where it's been done well and successfully.
Mm-hmm. So this reporter, continuing with his take on Mary Barra's bold statement that they're going to overtake Tesla, he says, I feel that if GM truly wanted to beat Tesla, they would have already, or even before Tesla was founded. We have to continuously go back to the fact that GM owned the EV market in the mid-90s in the last century with the EV1. From there, they could have been Tesla. But they missed the boat on that one, thinking that there was no future in electric vehicles. And then he talks about it took Tesla coming onto the scene with barely a factory to make its cars to forge the auto industry to this point. If a newbie automaker with just a couple of factories can bring EVs to production and make more money than both Ford and GM, which are selling more cars in total than Tesla, then already established automakers could have done it also. They just didn't want to until now.
Couldn't agree more with that particular analysis.
So we got a picture to pop up here, guys. Jesse, if you guys can pop up a 1968 Pontiac interior. And when I saw this, now that our Instagram friends can see this as well, this was the past, and what a glorious past it was. My wife and I owned a 1960 Chevy Impala that looked basically like this on the inside. The difference between this interior and our 60 Chevy Impala was the dash, which on this Pontiac has some padding. You notice that little ring on top? Mm-hmm. Ours was solid steel.
Oh, okay.
And remember, there were no seatbelts in 1960. So when you got into it, when you rear-ended somebody, you basically ate that dash. You got the steering wheel first, and then you got a steel dash, and your passengers were pretty unlucky. But anyway, this was the past, folks. This is all analog technology. That speedometer that you see there is actually a mechanical device. That is a steel cable that's running inside a sleeve going up to that speedometer. And when those went bad, you would actually hear it making noise, when it got crimped inside or if it wasn't lubricated well. And the only electronics here of any consequence is that AM radio that you see there to the right. And back then, it was all about AM. Now, this is a little bit of a souped-up car because if you look down toward the right, lower right by the steering wheel, I see what looks like an oil pressure gauge and probably an amp meter gauge showing how the battery's charging. And then down below it, there's a speedometer.
Yes. Yes. And
Sorry, tachometer.
A tachometer.
Tachometer. Yes. Yep.
And that's a beautiful car. And that speedometer reminds me exactly of what my Chevy Nova looked like. My very first car was a 73 Chevy Nova, and it was that speedometer exactly. And I know what you're talking about.
Beautiful cars, and of course, it's now we have 17-inch screens inside cars that are telling us all of this kind of information about the operation of the car.
Well, and in another year, when the Lucid comes out with the Gravity, it's going to be a 34-inch, and it's going to be a touchscreen.
Something else I just realized, if you look at the lower left portion of that wheel, those are levers. And that, again, were the type of cables that you have on your bicycle, for gear shift changes. That's what controlled your vents and your flappers for, redirecting air, whether you're recirculating, whether you're bringing air from the outside.
Oh, that's right.
And, of course, being mechanical, those things didn't last forever. Today, it's all electronic. In fact, the Tesla Model 3, you can actually talk to it and say, redirect the air and lower the temperature and, whatever you want. It's all voice commands. Pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. Ramon Hurd on YouTube says the internals of a 75 kilowatt pack are much different than the internals to the new 100 kilowatt pack. The models have different attachments as well to the cooling hoses, not to mention the micas and the other things.
Yeah. Well, we have not done that or tried that, by the way. But yeah, I'm sure that there are other things than just simply, screwing in a new battery pack underneath that floorboard in that car.
Yeah.
Facebook, Michael Napoli says, with technology as it is now, until an EV can get 400 miles per fill and a change in 5 minutes. These are electric golf carts. I believe they are great cars with 7 problems. Battery, 7 letters. There you go.
Yeah. Michael, I have to disagree just a little bit here. Sure, 400 miles per fill is nice. Most people are not capable of sitting in their car long enough to drive for 400 miles. In fact, many people will go 200, 250 miles, and they got to do a pit stop. It's time to it's time to stop. And the time it takes to do the pit stop is usually longer than 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You go in, if you've got gasoline, you go in, you start fueling your tank, and then you go into the convenience store. You come back out, your tank is full, you pull the gas off the hose out of the tank, put it all together, and you're on your way. Well, guess what? You just spent 10 minutes doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say instead of 5, if you can do 10, and that's where this next generation of EV battery is going to be. Ranges that are 400 to 600 miles plus, charge times that are 10 minutes to 15 minutes, somewhere around that range. I do agree that people want better. They want like gasoline. But if you only have to charge 200 miles and you can do 200 miles in 8 minutes, which is about what you can do in a 350 kilowatt charger today,
Mm-hmm.
then you're good.
Yeah.
That review.
Sure, go for it, Cass.
Oh, please.
Okay, so This article is back in October, but it says that there's about 10,000 Rivian vans on the road currently with Amazon, and then there's also their Amazon range currently is 150 miles or kilometers, and their charging speed is up to 150 kilowatts is possible, but initial models were originally 50 kilowatts.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Cass. You are an awesome fact checker. What
Thank
would we
you.
do without you? All right, we've got some other people chiming in. Niels is joining us from Denmark. He says the USA car fuel consumption has been almost constant for the last 5 years. Need much higher fuel costs to make a difference. Just increase personal deduction by the extra revenue. Good point.
Definitely a good point.
Claude was actually saying that the U.S. fuel reserves are at an all-time low compared to other countries, especially. He was mentioning that in the Friday podcast last Friday. All right, Instagram, Mike Malecki, Realtor says, can you upgrade a 50 kW battery pack on a Model Y to 80 kW pack? That's on a long-range Model Y. Gruber Motor Company's expertise is strictly related to the older, out-of-warranty Teslas. When we do get a later model that's still under warranty, it's typically for a modification, an aftermarket installation, a improvement to the suspension components, for example, adjustable control arms or whatever. And so we don't really get much involved in that. But when those get out of warranty, then we'll have some expertise there, Mike. All right. So pedestrian safety. Here's an interesting article. The Tesla Cybertruck is supposedly dangerous to not only occupants of other cars, but also to pedestrians. It's like Elon says, talking about the Cybertruck getting into an accident. If you have an argument with another car, you will win, so long as winning means inflicting life-threatening damage to other humans on the road. Well, Tesla did not respond for a request for comment, but apparently concerns about vehicle safety have grown as pedestrian deaths continue to climb, reaching now a 40-year high this year.
Yeah. Wow.
Traffic deaths have also risen, with vehicle deaths per million rising in the United States in recent years as they fell in other developed countries. This is according to a New York Times analysis. In the first half of this year, an estimated 19,515 people were killed in traffic crashes, according to NHTSA. Well, I have a take on this. I think the cars are safer than ever. And what I'm finding on the road is that drivers are becoming worse, more careless, and more distracted than ever. Here in Phoenix, Arizona, red light runners are becoming so prevalent that as the light turns green, if you take off immediately, you're putting yourself at great risk, because once or twice a month, you'll see somebody fly through that red light thinking that they're going to be able to beat that light.
You know, you made a great point, especially on the distracted driving. In fact, I want to call out this author on this article. It made a few different press articles, but he referenced back this New York Times. I read that New York Times article when it came out a couple weeks ago. It had nothing to do with EVs. It had everything to do with smartphone use in the United States has gone up, has increased the level of distracted driving, and as a result, the increased level of distracted driving has led to higher pedestrian accidents. And the call from the New York Times was for stricter laws and regulation around the use of cell phones in cars.
So let me ask you something. When you're driving and you're in traffic, and you might even have 3 lanes, and the person in front of you is applying their brake constantly, they're going slower than the people around them. You've got somebody in the left lane that's starting to veer into your lane. How often, when you pull forward and look at them, do you find them doing this? Well, these days, this is quite prevalent. And, you know, this is a new phenomena in my opinion. I don't think it is the weight of the cars, which is what they're alluding to here, saying that the Cybertruck is 6,800 pounds, it is harder to stop, and the 0 to 60 is 2.6 seconds. And therefore, the reaction time for a driver has been diminished. Granted, that may play into it, but I think the main cause of this kind of statistic climbing, people dying in accidents, is because of the inattentive drivers that are focused on their cell phones and not on driving. You know, my take on this is I drive race cars, and you don't have the luxury of even using a signal, a turn signal, when you're doing 200 miles an hour. It's a distraction. Everybody knows what you're doing. Have you ever seen an F1 race where they're using turn signals?
Not at all.
It doesn't happen, right? You need 100% focus, even 150% focus on what you're propelling. And you've got these 5,000 to 6,000 pound vehicles on the freeways that are missiles, and you've got distracted drivers like this, and that, in my opinion, is the primary cause of the increase in these kinds of statistics, either pedestrian deaths or fatalities on the road.
Oh, absolutely. You know, he uses these instances. It talks about the steel and the Cybertruck, and I'm just like blah blah blah, because the Cybertruck, if you took this article and substituted a Ford F-250 or Cybertruck, that other than the acceleration, all the comparisons would be there.
Mm-hmm.
The Cybertruck is not comparable to a Ford F-150, which is what the article tries to compare the Cybertruck to.
Yeah.
It's comparable to a Ford F-250, and if you look at the front grille on a Ford F-250, you're going to find that you have the same visibility issues, if not more so, than you would have with a Cybertruck.
Good point. YouTube, Rahat Salvan says, what are your thoughts on the 4680 battery? I hear mixed options or mixed opinions on it. Is it truly better than the 2170 batteries for longevity? If yes, then how so? First of all, the problem with this new battery technology is they haven't been around long enough for anybody to get a solid benchmark on what their lifespan is. And the best example of that is a Tesla Roadster, which came out in 2008 using a multi-cell 18650 lithium-ion design with 6,831 cells in a battery pack. The majority of those Roadsters are still running. They're still on the road, and the batteries are still healthy and usable. And that's going on 15 years now. The original design life of that battery pack was 10 years, and it exceeded all expectations. The bottom line is we don't know how long these new battery chemistries and technologies are going to last. So we can't weigh in on 4680 or 2170 battery longevity. We do know that the 4680 battery is a much larger battery, and the 2170 is larger than the 18650. Now, the question is, was there a trade-off? By going with a larger battery, fewer cells, cost savings, did that decrease or shorten the end-of-life expectancy?
Yeah, well, we don't know that. We do know that the 4680 batteries have come out as a slightly more energy-dense battery. We will never truly know it because this is not quite an apples-to-apples comparison. The 4680 batteries are almost exclusively made of the lithium iron phosphate, or LFP batteries, while the older 18650s and the 2160s are made of the older lithium ion technology.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different technology and charging properties that may have nothing to do with the battery size and will impact the life of these batteries.
And we find that often, yeah, Jesse?
I have a video for you guys here.
Sure.
Just so you know, also, Pete, the LFP batteries, the 4680 ones, that was the subject of our Million Mile Tesla video, where they've been lab tested at 300,000 miles and show zero degradation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they're much longer lifespan than we've seen on the ones so far.
Well, there you go. Yeah. YouTube, DeVille says, my son's 4th generation Prius fuel pump was $995 plus tax, plus installation.
Yeah, for a fuel pump.
Yeah.
Okay, what do we have on this video here, Jesse?
So this is a video on Twitter from CarWow. They did a bunch of drag races with the Cybertruck, but they also did a braking test with the Cybertruck versus a Ford. I'm not sure which Ford, but it'll show it here in a sec. That's a Raptor, it looks like. And they're doing a braking test right here. The Cybertruck brakes much better than the Ford.
And look who's winning. His hat came off even.
Yeah. So people are saying that the weight of the vehicle and the braking are an issue. Don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right, and the Raptor is a Ford F-150. The F-250 would have a slower or longer braking distance because it's a heavier vehicle.
Yeah. TikTok, Albert VO5 says, I never understood why hybrid technology wasn't the next step for the marketplace. Well, it was for a brief time.
I think Van Gogh's response to that, where he says at Alberto VO5, I believe it was. I agree. I do think it was. The hybrid technology was introduced in 2001 with the Toyota Prius, and it is now being supplemented or supplanted by the battery electric vehicle.
You know, something else that I can attest to, the first Prius we got would go maybe under a mile on electric power, and you had to be under like 30 miles per hour or so. But it was a paradigm shift. You began to realize that you don't need an ICE engine and exhaust and gasoline to actually propel a vehicle that transports you somewhere. Mm-hmm. And for us, it was definitely an eye-opener, and that's why we stayed with Priuses. We had two of them eventually, and then I got into the Tesla Roadster, which is 100% BEV.
My son and his wife had a Ford C-Max hybrid. It was a plug-in electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. And so for hybrid, it had about 20 to 25 miles of range, pure electric, and then the engine would kick in. Or if you were driving highway speeds and needed the extra kick, the engine would kick in. After a couple of years of that, they liked the electric portion of it so much, they traded it in and then recently bought a Model S so that they could, because the prices on used Model S's are so competitive with what other vehicles are like right now. And they said they'll never go back.
Amazing. My transition was severe, I guess you might say. I went from a Prius, four-door grocery getter sedan, to a Tesla Roadster.
Yeah, a little more extreme.
YouTube, Crunch is joining us to Grace Hopper. He says, thumbs up, number 8 from Newport Beach, SoCal, caught up soon. Smash that like button, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
YouTube, Ramon Hurt. Mary doesn't even believe her own BS. She did a $10 billion stock buyback. Her first step in preparing her golden parachute.
Ramon, there are a lot of people asking questions about that $10 billion stock buyback, and that might be one of them.
TikTok, Alberto VO5, it feels like hybrid was swept under the rug. Instagram, Sanja021996, dear sir, can I work for you or with you? Well, send us your resume. Any of you interested in a position here, ev@gruber.com. And while we're at it, let's talk about an addition to our social media team. We're looking for an editor. Again, ev@gruber.com. It's a cool job. If you like playing video games and spending your days on social media, this job may be just for you. Instagram, Vas Such Anapas. Hi, Vasu here. Does the United States have a big plan for the huge amount of disposed batteries in the future? Do we need to be aware of any rules regarding this? The U.S. has been taking care of that problem quite nicely. There are some companies emerging. Redwood Materials, one of the first. And what they see with these used batteries is high-grade ore. Instead of going to Bolivia and, brine ponds and then transporting it by ocean and, overland transport, they're just simply grabbing old batteries, and it's almost a 0% waste stream. So, yes, there are a lot of companies that see the financial benefits of doing that level of recycling.
Even the automakers themselves, including Tesla, have recycling facilities for their old batteries. So we're finding that very little of battery electric vehicle lithium-ion batteries are making their way to landfills. They're virtually all getting recycled and reused.
And guys, we've got Instagram now that can see pictures. Can we post that picture of the Gravity Here's a picture that got posted a couple days ago, and there are a couple of that. I think these are Lucid employees. And someone was saying, my God, that thing looks small. And then someone pointed out, well, it's the photographer's angle. And of course, he didn't know what the height of the individuals was. But this apparently is the Gravity SUV.
Ah, sharp looking car. I like it.
And release, I guess, is early 2024. Is that right?
The release, I had heard that it would be late 2024, that they are in production with
okay.
it, but it will be formally released later in the year.
All right, Niels joining us from Denmark again. He says, suspect Tesla's whole production has not saved much emission because people upgrade and drive more when it gets cheaper. The Cybertruck will probably be bought by city folk who don't really need a truck.
Oh, absolutely.
The hipsters, we've got a good video on that. Cybertruck shows up at a construction site. It's pretty, it's a humorous one. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can review that.
Yes. And Davil on YouTube says, I do miss Pontiac, especially the interiors.
Oh, yeah, that 1960 Chevy Impala. I was up on the roof doing some work one day, and we had a Nissan 95 Quest van. And looking at those two vehicles parked in our driveway, that 60 Chevy Impala looked like a 20-foot car compared to that Nissan Quest van. And but yeah, those were the glory days of cars. My batteries just went dead, so I'm going to swap those around here real quick.
Okay. While you're swapping those around, Niels from YouTube said, I was just in my old Mercedes 190, and it was amazing. It's the car in town that emits the least CO2 because I almost don't use it. He said, punish people on the gas and then leave the guzzlers be. Niels has, that's an intriguing and I think a good spot-on type of comment. You know, if you do raise the gas prices, it's going to cause a lot of angst here in the United States to do that, though.
Yeah, we've gone through that a few times. Remember in the 70s when OPEC decided to play Who's the Boss?
Oh, yes. Well, even this last year, as gas prices hit $5 a gallon in the United States, that caused a lot of issues. Ron from Florida on TikTok says, how about the issues charging anything other than a Tesla? The issues charging anything other than a Tesla are dissipating very quickly. I know that charging networks that aren't Tesla tend to be less reliable than the supercharger network, but there are getting to be so many networks or so many charge points that are CCS that it's kind of becoming a non-issue, and Tesla's starting to have conversions where somebody with a CCS charger can plug into a Tesla supercharger. That is just getting rolled out and started now.
Mm-hmm.
And then Niels has a comment for me. He says, Mark, remember to divide the specified range by 2 to get the practical range. He was talking about the 400-mile range. And so, well, Niels, I get that, although I have a 300-mile range on my car. I love the extra range, so I'm a fan of that. I drove 260 miles this weekend before I put it back on a charger. It was just running around, and it was nice to have that extra range to take care of. Yeah. So it's kind of a misnomer to be able to divide by half, although it is best practice to only use about half your battery's range.
So Ramon Hurt has an interesting perspective from YouTube. He says it's funny how people act like they don't have time to waste charging an EV, yet they are here on YouTube watching videos and commenting. They could do this while charging their cars. It's true.
Yes. On Facebook, Michael Napoli says, with all due respect, I disagree. Gavin Newsom can argue California is a model state that he's running perfectly. You sugarcoated that. These cars, as they are now, are a novelty.
I think that Michael is going to be one of the last adopters.
He might be. I don't think they're novelty anymore, but I don't think that people are comfortable enough with electric vehicles to make the transition wholesale yet. Mm-hmm. I am a admitted early adopter. I like the technology. I have found that it's, to me, is a superior technology, and I've never had range issues or charging issues. But I know that I'm in the minority with that too.
The Model Y and Model 3 have taken bestseller positions in various countries and areas around the world. I very seriously think we're out of the novelty stage.
You know, there are a lot of people out there that don't realize that they were early adopters. People that are into golfing, for example. What were they riding around in? You know?
Right.
YouTube, DeVille Bush had a video on braking improvements to be used on the new Cybertruck. Might that be Roush? Did we misspell that, or is it Bush? Anyway, I haven't seen any news about anyone talking about this. Any news you guys hear of? No, we have not. But, you know, Cybertruck aftermarket products are going to become prevalent, very ubiquitous.
I have heard something about that. Now, we're running short on time to go to our
we got to end it.
So we will address further comments in the Roadster podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.